All right, I'd like to call the work session of October 2nd, 2017 to order. May I have a roll call, please?
Mrs. Frankel. Mrs. Frankel. Mr. Klein. Ms. Quackenbush. Mr. Barbarulo. Mr. Spindell. Mr. Rosenberg. Mrs. Piella. Mrs. Wallace. And Mr. Banta.
Just say Mrs. Piella could not be here this evening. She may be here later, but apparently the cardinal is coming to her parish, and she's a big muckety-muck in the church, so she had to be there. And that's the only reason she's not here. Before we do the flag salute, I'm going to ask everybody just to raise for a moment. And I'm sure you all are aware of what happened in Las Vegas. And I'd just like to take a moment of silence to pray for those victims and their families. Okay, thank you very much. And if you just join me in a flag salute. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The New Jersey Open Public Meeting Law was enacted to ensure the right of the public to have advance notice of and to attend the meetings of the public bodies at which any business affecting their interests is discussed or acted upon. In accordance with the provisions of this Act, the Fair Lawn Board of Education has caused notice of this meeting be published by having a date, time, and place thereof, distributed to the persons on the approved list, posted in the Board of Education Administrative Office, and sent to the Bergen Record and the Star Ledger. The announcement for the work session meeting, along with the date, time, and place thereof, was distributed on September 13, 2017. The items we discussed during the closed work session may include personnel matters, student matters, legal matters, negotiations, and grievances, and tactics and techniques utilized in protecting public safety and property. The results of these discussions will be made public as soon as possible. I'd like to make a couple of announcements. First of all, the question and answer section regarding the referendum is up on the website, and up at the top says referendum. You click on there, and then it takes you right to the referendum section, and then you can find approximately 40 questions that have come up throughout the meetings we've had and answers. There's also available an email address, referendumquestions@fairlawnschools.org. If you have a question that hasn't been answered, or if you're not clear on something that was in the questions and answers, feel free to send an email, and the staff will look at it, and we'll put the answers up on the website in due course. And then there's one other thing regarding to the superintendent search. We have retained West Hudson Associates. Run by Dr. Librera, former Secretary of Education for the state of New Jersey. We met with him this evening. We went over a timeline. We will be putting an ad into the Star Ledger this weekend, and then we're going to be discussing further steps as far as more ads, meeting with the public, meeting with stakeholders, and we'll let you know as soon as we have some more information. I just want to bring you up to date that that's moving along. At this time, I'm going to turn the meeting over to Dr. Palestis and Lynn Goldman and Spitzer. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming to our board meeting. So this is yet another meeting that we set up for the community in order to discuss the proposed referendum. As you know, at the last meeting, we had a presentation by our architect with preliminary plans. Tonight, we will be hearing very, very rough estimates, and I want to emphasize very rough estimates about the cost of the project and the impact that might have. I do want to add to some of the items that Mr. Banta listed. Also on our webpage, I would really encourage you every week or so, take a look at the webpage because we have Q&As. We also added a section called Did You Know, which is more of a general information section. There is now a survey that is on the webpage. It was launched just a little while ago. So far, I think 1,200 responses to the survey. All you really need to do is go on the web page. On the front page, on the top, you'll see a section that says referendum. And if you click on that, you will see subsections come up that you can read more information about, and also you can then take the survey as well. So I encourage you to do that. There's another section next to it about strategic plan. Keep in mind that we have that meeting scheduled for October 11th, and you can get information about what strategic planning is. That will be facilitated by New Jersey School Boards Association. Our next referendum meeting will be on November 6th. As you know, we're trying to do this the first Monday of the month. And at that time, our Assistant Superintendent of Schools, Mr. Norcia, will be reporting out the survey results. So we are quickly putting together as much information as we can. I hope that that's well received in the public. If there are other questions, we're always available to answer them. But there is also a mechanism that you can ask the questions now through the webpage, and we'll be responsive to that as well. So I do want to introduce our speakers tonight. Lisa Gorab is our bond counsel, and she will be walking you through the bonding component of the referendum. Mary Lyons, our financial advisor, and Steve Sikora, our architect.
Thank you, Dr. Kalestis. Good evening. I'm the board's bond counsel, so the first thing I want to tell you is why they have a bond counsel. When districts have to undertake large projects that can't fit within their budget, they have to do something called bond. Bond is a fancy word for borrow money, like a mortgage, similar to a mortgage. So attorneys that only specialize in certain laws can represent the district with respect to the bond referendum, being a combination of election laws, school law, and tax law. So that is why the board is required to hire a bond counsel. Because if we follow this path down the road and the referendum is successful, the board will be issuing securities, bonds, in a public offering, and they need to comply with securities laws just like IBM or any other corporate entity. So that is why I'm here. And what I wanted to talk to you about is the projects that are going to be undertaken. As you know, they are large projects that can't fit within the budget. They are projects that make sense to be paid over a long period of time so that the generations that benefit from these projects pay. So not just the generations that live here in the next couple of years, but all the generations. So when a family with children moves into Fairlawn 10 years from now, they are paying their share of the projects because they're using the projects and getting the benefit of them. In order for a board to borrow money, they have to do something called a referendum, which is a vote of the public. And there are certain dates in the year that the law allows the district to present questions to the public for bonding. March 13th is one of those dates, and that is the date proposed for this referendum. But before the board can send you a ballot question on the ballot to vote on, there is a large process before that, which includes architectural plans, financial plans, and which culminates in an application to the Department of Education. The Department of Education reviews it for educational purposes, for code compliance, but one of the most important things that the department reviews it for is eligibility for aid. And we have been asked to put our heads together with the proposed project and come up with what we think is the aid for this project. The state provides aid for capital projects. They used to provide grants, and this board has accessed those grants in the past and used them for projects in the past. Grants are no longer available. What the state is providing now is something called debt service aid. So the state will look at your project and decide what percentage of the project they will pay for in debt service aid. What is debt service aid? It's a commitment to pay a percentage of your bond payment, your loan payment. So let's say you have $1 of a loan payment. The if the state's going to pay 10% of it, they pay 10 cents of that dollar loan payment, and the taxpayers pay the 90%. And there's a process and an application to try to increase that aid as high as we can get it. The application has two parts. One is for rehabilitation and one is for new construction. Your project has both. It has renovations and new construction. And both of those, each of those is aided differently. New construction does not garner a high percentage of aid, but renovation does. So we have looked at the projects. We've looked at the history that we've gone through with the Department of Education. I have been doing this for 27 years. I did start when I was 3, as I said before. And, God, that's a long time. And we represent many districts throughout the state, and there have been many referendum. And if you've been reading the paper, you'll see that there are many coming up. There's renewed effort to kind of protect the investment of your schools, the structure, the envelope, and renovations for older systems. So we took a look at the application. We took a look at what's called unhoused students. A school district can't just build a 10,000 square foot addition and say, if we build it, they will come. The state doesn't allow districts to do that. You have to justify every new square foot you build. You have to show through a complex calculation that assigns each student a square foot allotment that you are justified to build what you are building. So we looked at the additions at TJ and we looked at the additions at Memorial, and based on enrollment projections, every square foot that is proposed to be built is eligible for aid. So there's no excess cost in that project, and all of the renovation costs of the referendum are also eligible. So based on those assumptions, which they are, and knowing that we can never be sure of what percent the state is going to pay until they tell us in a letter before the referendum, because we can't go to referendum unless we get that commitment in writing. These are all, again, just estimates. And based on our analysis, it seems that the state will probably pay for about 15.4% of your project. These are calculations based on estimates and what we've been given and what the state has done in the past. The state's aid can be as high as 40%, but that is only available for complete renovation projects. The state does not aid new construction at the same level that they aid renovation. So since this is to meet growing enrollment and you need the space, we estimate the aid to be approximately 15.4%. And we should note as well that it could be a spectrum. It could be a little higher, could be a little lower. But as of today, based on the board's request for us to do this analysis, we believe that the state would pay for about 15.4% of the project, with the remainder being the taxpayers. And Mary Lyons is the board's municipal advisor, and she's going to speak on, based on my assumptions and my conclusion of the aid, where does she believe the tax impact will fall in terms of an estimate.
Good evening, everyone. As Lisa said, my focus is more on the financial aspect of your referendum. And once the referendum passes, the sale of the bonds. And my job is to make sure that this is done as efficiently as possible and that we get you the lowest interest rate possible. School district bonds are sold competitively. There's a competitive process that we have to go through. And along with Lisa, I would help guide the district in that process. I started doing this when I was 2. And the company that I work for, which is Phoenix Advisors, for the last 5 or 6 years has been the leading municipal advisor in the state for local governments and municipalities and school districts. Some of the services that we provide are running various tax impact and financing scenarios before the referendum in preparation for it, assisting in applying some information to the public during the referendum. And then once the referendum passes, in conjunction with Lisa, going forward and implementing the sale of the bonds, which is going to include the preparation of a rating presentation. These bonds will be rated by Moody's, Investor Services, and also working with Lisa in presenting a prospectus to potential investors and then conducting the bond sale itself. In terms of the tax impact at this point, and I think Lisa has emphasized this, these are preliminary numbers because you're not going to be selling bonds probably until July of 18. But we believe that the bonds could be issued over about a 25-year period, and the tax impact would be about $125, even if the state gives you no debt service aid, and that's $125 per year on the average assessed home. The district would sell the bonds to finance the total project, and they would receive the debt service aid every year, so the state would pay a certain percentage of the principal and interest, and the district would pay the rest. We likely would sell the bonds after July of 2018, so you won't see this hitting your pocketbooks until the 1920 school year. It's anticipated, as I mentioned, that we'd sell the bond over 25 years, and I'm assuming in my projections at this point a 4% interest rate. That's higher than current rates. Current rates are about 3.5%. But the crystal ball for future interest rates is a little murky right now. There's talks of tax change at the federal level. And generally speaking, as the economy improves, interest rates do increase. So that's why we have that cushion. Based on the total assessed valuation of the municipality and the average home value of about $327,000, as I mentioned, we expect that the tax impact will be about $125 per year with no debt service aid, and about $105 per year if in fact the state provides the kind of debt service aid we think the project justifies. We also have assumed that the state may prorate the debt service. As Lisa mentioned, you are entitled to 40% of eligible costs, but the state of New Jersey, being the state of New Jersey, has prorated that amount over the last few years, and we've included that assumption in our numbers, so we're trying to be conservative. If the assessed valuation of the municipality grows because of new development, that tax impact could be slightly less. It depends on what will happen going forward. And again, I just want to mention that all these projections are estimates at this point. We're trying to be very conservative, but this is not going to happen until July of 18 at the earliest, and the interest rates will be what the interest rates are on the day that the bonds are sold. And I will turn this over to Steve.
Thank you, Mary. Steve Sikora with Land Associates. I'm one of the principals at the firm. We're architects and engineers and do a lot of school construction work, school design work in the state of New Jersey, especially Bergen and Passaic counties. I was here approximately 2 or 3 weeks ago and gave a presentation on the floor plans for the two schools, Thomas Jefferson Middle School and the Memorial Middle School. And I'm here tonight just to give you an update on where we are with the plans. We've completed our schematic plans, including the site plans and floor plans. We've completed the DOE application and all the necessary paperwork to submit to the DOE, and those papers will be delivered to the DOE tomorrow morning. With that submission, we also have to submit to the local planning board. So we've submitted a package to the local planning board, and also submitted a copy of the package to the county superintendent of schools. The DOE now will have this in their court tomorrow, and it will take approximately 3 months for them to review and give us what they call a PEC, which is a preliminary eligible cost, which is what Lisa was referring to, and that's the local and state shares of funding that will be determined by the Department of Education. So we anticipate having some kind of answer from the state sometime in December of this year. Once we get that PEC letter, if we agree with what the state says, then the state would issue an FEC, which is a final eligible cost letter, and then we can proceed to the bond referendum after that. So from our standpoint, we've completed all the schematic drawings, the application, and all the required paperwork, the demographic projections, and the state will have that in their hands tomorrow morning. So I'll turn it over if there are any questions.
All right, Ms. Wentzel at the microphone. Board members, questions? These microphones on each end. Board members have questions?
I just wanted to know, how did you decide that you would go out for a 25-year bond rather than 30?
Well, the renovation work probably would anticipate perhaps a 15 to 20-year term, and the new construction could be sold for a longer period of time. There are certain regulations that we have to follow, which take into consideration the average useful life of the project being financed. We've picked a 25-year term, not only for those reasons, but also because the longer you sell bonds for, your investor interest diminishes, particularly when you're talking about a $25 million bond issue. So it's both a legal and a marketing consideration.
And the next question, can they ever be
All right, you got to use the mic.
Can they ever be called early?
Yes, they can be called. Typically in New Jersey, you have something, you have a call date of 8 to 10 years, and generally speaking, you can call the bonds probably 2 years before you hit the call date. That makes sense.
Any board members, questions? All right, we're going to open up to the public. If you just step up to the microphone, state your name, and then our professionals will answer whatever questions you might have.
Multitasking here. I'm Emily Cohn of Garden View. I have two questions. So one is the rate for the state debt service aid. Will that be likely to change at all with a new governor?
Well, that's a very good question. So the aid used to be funded at 100%. Well, first let me go back. There used to be no aid at all for facilities, and particularly for municipalities like Fair Lawn. There was always aid for lower demographic, but not for Fair Lawn. Then in 2000, the state adopted a law that provided, again, as we said, aid of 40% of eligible costs. And like with any law, you need to read the fine print. The fine print here is the word eligible costs. So they funded it at 100% through 2008 or 9, and at that point they started funding it at about 85%. So your question is a good one. We think it's reasonable that they'll stay at 85%. The lowest that the state has ever gone, to my knowledge, in debt service aid was 67%, and that was in the 80s, I think. When there was a fiscal crisis in the state. So we think it's reasonable to assume 85%, but no one can guarantee that it wouldn't go to 70% or 100%. We don't know that answer, but again, that's an assumption that we think is reasonable.
And if I could ask Steve a question, is there any more update on the civil engineers' work around the traffic aspects and the outside environment of the new middle schools?
Yes, we met shortly after the last meeting I was at, met with the administration and civil engineer in our office, and reviewed and watched the traffic patterns at the Thomas Jefferson School, which is going to be more impacted by the construction than at Memorial School, because we're adding the addition in not only where the paved playground is, but also where there's existing parking, so we'll be losing some parking at that school. And we watched the traffic patterns, we watched the buses come in and the parents pick up their students. It was later in the day. The traffic seemed to move well through the site, but we are impacting parking, as I had mentioned, and we have developed a plan that was reviewed by the administration to increase parking at the school. Right now we're looking at something to the south of the soccer field that's off to the east side of the school. So off to the right side of the gym if you're facing from the roadway. There's a soccer field there. In front of that, there's lawn area that is currently unused for athletic field use. We're looking to put in additional parking there. We're looking to reconfigure the parking in front of the school to put some handicap spaces. And then just reconfigure the parking in the rear to gain a few more spaces. And then also, because we are displacing the playground, looking to expand the paved playground area to the rear where the proposed addition is. And all that would be funded out of the school's general operating budget, not the referendum. And we would look to do the work prior to the start of any construction, because we would be displacing the playground and the parking there. So we would look to have that work done, if possible, with the approval of the referendum in March, this coming summer.
Okay, and can I ask why that was funded by the operating budget and not included as part of the referendum?
Because of the cost of that, it's being separate from the referendum itself. The cost of that.
Okay, and then a question for the board. The materials that are being submitted to the county superintendent and the State Department of Education and the, I guess the local planning board is what you mentioned, those three places. Are they, is all that going to be placed on the website sometime soon?
I don't know, Michael, but yes, it will be placed on our website. We will not be placing any schematics or blueprints or floor plans onto the website for security purposes. But the general information that Steve's put together and sent out, that will be placed on the website within the next week, 10 days.
Will the cost estimate, like there was discussion at the last meeting about a slightly more detailed cost breakdown for the $25 million that the state required. Will that be included as well on the website?
Yeah, it's something that you sent down, Steve, or?
Yeah, there's a detailed estimate that's part of the DOE application. It's one of their forms.
Okay, so that'll
Two of
be,
their forms, I should say. I'm sorry.
that'll be part of the forms that we're going to put on the website.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Anyone else?
Good evening, Baruch Gadol, 4158 East Terrace. I have a couple of questions. So the bonds which are going to be issued, you mentioned the interest rate, about 4%. Is it a fixed rate for the duration or this adjustable rate?
Yes, it's fixed.
So it's
For the
25 years, it's like a mortgage fixed rate?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Now, you mentioned, and one of you emphasized, eligible costs. What are exactly eligible costs?
That's another tough question, but for renovation, eligible costs are the budgeted costs for facilities that relate to education. So for example, if you were building a pool or a greenhouse or a stadium, those might not be eligible costs for renovation. When I say building, I mean renovating those things. But all of the district's proposed renovation costs are eligible costs, so they are being funded at 40%. Eligible costs for new construction are new space that is justified by unhoused students. So we have to look at the 5-year projection of students and compare that projected enrollment to the district's functional capacity, which is a calculation that the architect did. And so let's say, I'm going to use an example, a school district's functional capacity is 100 students, and you expect to have 150 students in 5 years. You have 50 unhoused students. If those are elementary students, it's an elementary school, the State Department of Education says each of those 50 students gets 135 square feet per student. So you multiply 50 times 135 square feet, and you get the maximum that you can build for your proposed unhoused students. All of the new construction is justified by unhoused students based on our calculation. The district is justified to build close to, I think it's close to 50,000 square feet based on the enrollment projections done by a demographer versus the functional capacity of the school. And the new square footage is proposed to be about 46,000. So we're within our allotment of new space. So all of our space is eligible, but that's not the end of the story. Then the State Department says, well, we don't fund new construction at what it really costs. We're going to assume you can build for $143 a square foot. Even the state has admitted that that's a ludicrous number, but it hasn't caused them to change that number. So the maximum aid for a new construction that you can ever get, even if all of your square feet is justified, is 40% of $143 a square foot. So if it costs a district $286 a square foot to fund, you see that automatically goes down from 40% to 20%. In Bergen County, you can't build for $286 a square foot. So the governor, the limit of the 143 on new construction really limits the aid you can get on new construction. So that was a long answer, and I'm sorry. But
it's okay, no? I asked for it.
Thank you.
If you don't mind, a couple of more questions. It's addressed to Steve, actually. Was any thought or anything, any consideration was given in this renovation and rehabilitation to some sustainable energy? You know, some sources of, you know, solar or anything that kind of meet our green agendas? Or that's beyond our scope?
Well, we have energy conservation items that we would like to implement as part of the program: energy efficient windows, energy efficient HVAC. We were actually talking about the air conditioning systems that are proposed for the auditoriums, that we would have what they call demand control ventilation, VCV, where you have a sensor that monitors CO2 in the space and adjusts the amount of outside air that would be introduced into the space. And that is an energy saving conservation item that would be implemented as part of that. And there's also consideration for using what's called an energy recovery wheel on not only the equipment for the auditoriums, but also the equipment for the proposed additions, where we can take free energy from exhaust air. So say in the wintertime, space in the building is around 70 degrees. We are required by code to exhaust a certain amount of air. And that air that we're going to exhaust to the outside is going to have a 70-degree temperature associated with it. So before we exhaust that air, we go through this medium, which takes the energy from that 70-degree air and warms up the outside air that's coming in that may be at 20 degrees. And we can use what they call free heating, and then in the summertime, free cooling as an energy conservation measure. So those are some of the things. We're looking at using LED lighting. Oh, I'm sorry. We're looking at using LED lighting throughout the building, both inside and outside. So there's a number of energy conservation items that we are looking to implement.
I understand, but I know there was a period, I think, like 6 years ago, I think Board of Education was looking at some solar energy, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, since we're doing some quite extensive new construction, wouldn't be now the right time to look into that? I don't know how that falls with the entire scope, but I mean, we are adding roof area and some services that could be applicable.
You know, let me answer that. What? No, but we looked at, since I've been on the board, solar 3 times. And every single time it's a loser. It takes 25 years to pay it back, and by that time the panel is no good. It ruins, it voids your roof warranties. We looked at it with the town because they didn't have enough space. And every single time we looked at it, solar does not pay for itself. And the board felt that that was not the way to go, to saddle taxpayers with solar panels that we're going to lose money on. But Lisa, if you have something else to add.
I just wanted to add that, you know, solar is very popular, and we're working with many districts regarding solar panels. All of them are big headaches. But that's not to say they shouldn't be done. What districts are considering now is not owning the solar panels, but doing something called a power purchase agreement, where a private investor actually puts them on your roof.
Which has been around for many years already.
Many years. The problem with the power purchase agreements in New Jersey is that our subsidy, which is called an SREC, has had a very, it's in a depressed market right now. So these power purchase agreements are not as attractive as they were before. For example, we just bid one in a district very close to here, and they got 8 cents. We did it a year ago, and it was at 4 cents. That's a big difference. To do a power purchase agreement and solar, you have to guarantee you're going to save the money. What's important is a new roof. You raise an important issue. They are putting new roofs on these additions. There's no reason why the board can't look at it again, but again, they have to be looked at. The devil is in the details. The roof warranties. You don't want to put new roofs on these additions only to have the warranties voided.
And again, the reason I brought it up because of the new
solar
construction.
technology is getting better. They're not, I used a technical word, they're not putting holes in the roofs anymore to put them on. So it's getting better. So
I just thought it would be a great opportunity.
Won't preclude the board from looking at it, but most are not owning the solar. They're doing
Right,
power
and
purchase.
that was my next thing about the purchase power agreement, because I know a lot of municipalities and school districts for the state and other states as well, they're going that route.
That's correct.
Yeah. So I would like to ask the board maybe to look at that again, since you are
Well,
going.
we can look at it again, but we can't put it to the referendum. I mean, a referendum is set. And the SRECs have been nothing but a headache and nothing but losers. A lot of districts, poor districts, I know Bayonne, the state just gave them $2 or $3 million worth of solar panels and said, here. That's great, I mean, if somebody wants to give them to us, but we've looked at it a number of times, and every single time, they cost us money. They were lost.
But I thought in a power purchase agreement that doesn't really cost us money, because the cost is absorbed by the company which is installing it. It's like a lease thing, right?
It's similar to a lease,
Right.
but you do have to enter into a 15-year contract to buy solar power at a certain price with escalations. And the district has to be certain that the delta between what they pay now and what they're going to pay under the power purchase agreement produces sufficient savings. So again, you know, the SREC market is really not doing well, and so the price for power purchase agreements has gone up.
It's for the future. And my last question is regarding the schematics. You said they will not be available for public for security, for concerns. What are the concerns? Why can't we see them?
I do not, and I don't think anybody on this board wants our blueprints and schematic diagrams out to the public for anybody to see. And I'm not, obviously I'm not talking about you.
No, I
But once we
understand,
put them out there, once we put out the schematics and the blueprints, other than what was given at the last meeting, the public doesn't need to know those kind of details. Where the doors are, where the windows lock, what type of security measures there are. We don't want to have that stuff out there. It's just, there's no other way to say it.
But so the public will not know how the building will look or any design aspects of it until it's basically being built, or how does it work?
Well, you saw the schematics and we
Right,
had
which
them
is
out at the
which
first
are
one.
very
And
preliminary.
I want you to know that we contacted the New Jersey Department of Education for guidance. The New Jersey Department of Education does have a division that deals with school security. They contacted law enforcement, and what we were told is that schematics should not be put on the internet, should not be posted on a school webpage. are exempt from any Oprah requests due to security reasons. So law enforcement, this is not just something that we decided to take lightly. We checked with law enforcement and the Department of Education. Schematics will not, under any detailed blueprints will not be shared with the public at all, based on advice that we have from law enforcement and the New Jersey Department of Education.
So my question is again, we will not know how it will look until it's built? I mean, I'm not really clear here. I mean,
you will have the general schematics that Steve provided several weeks ago.
There's going to be a red.
Okay.
No. And Jeff, want to say something in there? Back to the phone, please.
If I could just add something before you speak. The plans that I presented on September 11th have been more detailed, but the layout has not changed on the floor plan. So for both schools, the layout is essentially the same as what I had presented 3 weeks ago.
Okay.
All right, Jeff.
Going back to the solar, you mentioned that it's, you know, we know that it's been a loser, and you mentioned that the savings have to be significant. I would just want to throw out there for us, if we want to look at this again, and I would like to, that even if we are going to pay the same and we kind of break even with it, whether, regardless of how we do it, whether, I mean, I'm not a big fan of using the roofs. I know that there's many other ways to get solar energy. Just throwing this out there, maybe if we just break even and it's the same, maybe we do it because it's the right thing to do. And I think that's just something to consider, that we're not only looking at this as a point that we're going to save money, but as a point that it's environmentally correct and it's good for our community, and it's a right signal to send, I believe, to our young people. And then on another note, with regard to the gentleman's question, obviously we're not going to put schematics out there because of the safety issues, but will there be at least like a picture of what it will look like? Usually, you know, you get a model of a building, not of the insides and which ducts people can climb through and all that, but in terms of, this is what it's going to look like, these are the bricks we're going to choose, and we're going to, because I want to make sure that it's aesthetically pleasing also. We are spending $24 million on it, and schools are a sense of pride in the community, and I do believe they should be beautiful.
It sounds like you're interested in having what we call a rendering done, which would be the look from the outside, what the outside of the building would look like, or the addition. We can definitely do that.
Because I remember we didn't get those. I don't recall getting one for Westmoreland. And it's not that I have a problem with what it looks like. It just would have been nice to have gotten that and had some conversations about it, about what our buildings are going to look like. We're spending the money, we're responsible for that, so we should do that.
Thank you. I think this is fair.
Well, I wanted to just reiterate, because I'm really not sure that it was said as clearly as I'm going to say it. When people can get their hands on schematics, we cannot stop the crazy person that wants to find a way into the school with a gun and wreak havoc. This is the reason that the police do not ever want any detailed plans of a school building to be placed online. And I'm just thinking about what just recently happened in Las Vegas, and I am sure that that gentleman managed to get details of the setup of that hotel, because I understand he had cameras placed around because he'd been hovering there for weeks. That's a hotel. But that's the reason, and I don't think it was said clearly enough. Not that we care that you see it, because we don't expect you to go with an Uzi. Okay, but that's really what the concern is of the police and the school board. The other thing, forgive me if I'm blunt, but to do that model, is that an additional cost to the board? Yes, thank you.
Just in regards to the solar panels, I'm one of the people that would like to see that. And when we looked with the town, it's a couple of years ago, and I remember one of the discussions was about putting them in the parking lot, so they're not on the roofs like they have at Rutgers, where they're on the parking lots. You know, maybe we should put that on an agenda for the town, when we meet, you know, the shared services, that maybe that should be on an agenda, we could look at that again, because there are, you know, we originally looked with the town, we looked pretty much, I think, exclusive roof. That was, because that was the way it was really being done, and now there's, like, the panels are smaller, they're made differently now, so, you know, maybe we could possibly relook at it, because we all have parking lots, so that might be a different way to approach it, so we could put it on.
I don't disagree. And
Right,
if it,
not for the referendum.
No,
I'm
no,
just
not for
saying
the
as part of, because we meet with the town, so it might be, we might want to reinitiate that topic.
And that was, they came to us because
Yes.
they didn't have enough roof space
Right.
to make it worth their while. And
Yes.
even when we threw in with them,
Right.
it was still a loser.
But it was the roofs that was the problem.
No, that was part of the problem. The other problem was it was a loser, money-wise.
Right,
We were going to lose hundreds of thousands of dollars if we did that.
Right.
But it might be different now,
Right,
and we'll look at it
It
again.
definitely is different now, but I'm just saying because of a lot of the panels that they're putting up now, like even if you go to Paramus Park, they're putting up like little.
I know, it's like a little
easels, you know,
A-looking
and,
roof.
right, and they're putting up A-frames, or I don't know, you're the technical guy, but they're putting up like, they're doing it differently, because
Well, I think maybe Ron could put it on the Buildings and Grounds Committee. We could discuss it, and then if it's something we want to pursue, then we'll talk about it with the town. Sure. Right, okay, that's fine.
Okay, thank you very much.
Hi, good evening. Adi Vaxman. I have a question. Lisa, you mentioned that the state aid is depending on the demographic projections of growth. We all know that we're somewhat in this situation because the demographic projections were not accurate. Do we have a new demographic study that includes landmark, that includes, you know, more realistic numbers to base that?
I would just like to correct the premise of your question, Adi, and it's a good question. But landmark was included in the original demographic report, but go ahead.
Okay, that's the question. Do we have a new study that's more
I just
relevant,
wanted
that's more
to
accurate?
further correct, if you'll excuse me. The demographics that were done were on target and accurate. When I said at several meetings we are engaging another demographer, that is not because of any inaccuracies that existed in the first report. It's to get a fresh set of eyes from another expert to confirm what our first demographer found. And the logic for that, and I've been talking about this at several of our meetings, is that we are checking and double checking every source of data that we have. And that includes several sources. So the first is a demographer. We're having a second demographer who will redo the entire demographic report. But we have done that on a continuous basis with other information in this project moving forward. When we want a second set of eyes on the project, we've done that as well. But both demographers will pick up the Radburn development, landmark at Radburn. They will be included in both, and were included in the information that was just sent down to the state of New Jersey. So the state is aware of that.
So when was the last demographic study made, and do we have access to that? Can we see what the
The last
projections
study
are?
was last year.
But that's the one we presented back in February?
Yes.
And
Now, the new demographic study cannot be done until October. And what happens in New Jersey is we have an official count statewide of students that takes place on the 15th of October. Once that is entered into the state database, it will take a demographer several weeks to produce a new demographic report, and that's a public document as well.
And are we able to submit, if those numbers are higher, are we able to submit changes to the state?
If the new demographic study has higher numbers, yes, but I'm not sure that that would work to your advantage in that you've already justified your square footage by your current projections.
Okay, thank you.
Any other members of the public? Okay, well, I guess we're We're done. Yeah, this was the only thing we had on. So, if I could have a motion to adjourn the work session? All in favor? Aye. Thank you very much. We'll see you on October 11th back here for the strategic planning meeting. Thank you.